right, welcome everyone to the Mindfulness Everything show. This is a show about where we'll spend some time talking about the 7 attitudes of mindfulness, which was developed by Jon Kabat-Zinn. And so in this show, we will unpack the attitudes. And not only that, we'll talk about how we can apply it to our daily lives and, of course, our mindfulness practice as well. So my name is Han Ee. I am a HR consultant and as well as a performance psychologist, and I'll be hosting this series. And today we're very excited to have Tony with us, who is our guest. And maybe I'll just invite Tony. Welcome, and maybe you can just say a few things about yourself.
Okay, thank you, Han Ee, and welcome to everyone. Glad to be here and talking about this. I've had an MBSR practice of my own for probably close to, 35, 40 years. And I've been teaching the program for the last probably 8 years. And doing so with small groups. And I love particularly the fact that the MBSR is sort of rooted in these attitudes, or that these attitudes form a great context of it, because it's really helped me to learn a lot about how to be with myself and to offer that to my participants in a way that's quite different from some of the other things that we do. So yeah, I'll leave it at that, and we can move on from there.
Okay, thank you very much. And MBSR stands for Mindfulness-Based Stress Reduction. So this is an 8-week program that was developed by Jon Kabat-Zinn for one of the key objectives is stress reduction. And it sounds like, Tony, the importance of how the attitudes are infused and embodied within this 8-week program. Am I right to say that?
Yes. I love what Jon Kabat-Zinn says about them. Well, what he says about mindfulness in general is that it's a particular type of learning. It's not that we can just do the meditation practice and hope that something will happen, because it invites us to bring all of ourselves to the learning. And learning can only take place, he believes, and I concur with him, when you are, I don't want to say completely stressless, but when you're in a space of openness, receiving, calm, kindness, which is what the attitudes provide us with.
That's great. So let's find out more about this attitudes, right? And as an overview, the first one is non-judging, patience, beginner's mind, trust, non-striving, acceptance, and letting go. So today, let's spend some time focusing on non-judging, right? So what are your thoughts? What comes to your mind about this attitude of non-judging?
Yeah. I've been doing mindfulness, my own personal practice, for quite a long time. And I find that the more I look into even something like the attitudes, the more I understand a little better how to describe them. And one thing that I learned pretty quickly is that those 7 words that you said don't necessarily always translate exactly as they do in the normal way, in the normal language that we use every day. So it took me a little while to get my head around this non-judgment and what it might mean in light of mindfulness. So, and I'm still learning. But one of the things that I've come to understand is that when, especially when we go into practice and we become still and we become quiet, all sorts of things start to arise: thoughts, sensations, feelings, etc., etc. And what I started to notice eventually was that my mind had a comment to make about every single thing that was arising in those moments. And then that started to help me understand Jon Kabat-Zinn's definition of non-judgment. Okay, so our aim is to allow all these things to come up, whether we're in practice or whether we're in daily life, and just try and be with them, right? Directly experiencing them without deciding or letting our mind decide if we like it or if we don't like it or if we can't be bothered with it. So it's a way of being with whatever's present without making up your mind straight away before giving it enough time to see what's really here, as to whether it's something that you want or you don't want. I don't know. What do you think, Han Ee? That's my understanding up until now. I don't know whether you might want to add anything to that.
Yeah, so I think clearly we realize that we have a busy mind, right? And you know how some people describe it as a monkey mind. So it's all this stuff that's floating in and floating away. And so this non-judging thing was also something that I really had to grapple with, right? What does that mean? And he describes it, Jon Kabat-Zinn describes it as a sort of being a impartial witness to our experience. And our experiences can be positive, can be negative, whatever it may be, and allowing it to stream in and stream out, and we are sort of taking that stance of observing or tuning in and listening in a impartial and, for lack of a better word, non-judgmental way.
Yeah. And how hard is that? Because what I realized in my I thought it was just me at first. And I think a lot of my participants say, "Oh, I can't do this because my mind won't quieten down." But it's a very normal part of us. And also perhaps, our education systems generally teach us to evaluate, and judge and label and categorize everything. And that's exactly what non-judgment asks us not to do. Not to categorize, not to label, to just, as you say, observe without any sort of agenda, initially, at least, to give us that space to see, okay, because as soon as we start doing the judging, it's like the message is, okay, I know what's happening here and I know how it's going to end up, so I don't need to pay any more attention. And so what can happen is that we can cut ourselves off from seeing a bigger picture, getting a bigger perspective, missing information that might be useful because we've decided that it's this way and no other way. We just react into going there. That's been my experience too. And as I understand a little more what he's saying, and then I notice it in my practice, and then I've started to notice it in my everyday as well, even when I'm not, formally practicing, how my mind jumps to conclusions about what is going on.
I suppose the other way of looking at it is then, what are the implications when we are overly judgmental, right? And sort of finding that balance, right? And we're constantly picking on things, berating ourselves, having a critical view on other people. And not to say there's no place for that, right? But I think the key is when it becomes overly used and overly habitual, it can have an impact on our mental and even our physical well-being.
Yeah. And I'm glad you brought in that word balance, because I think personally in my practice, I went to the extreme, not judging at all, and then starting off with judging everything and then, trying not to judge at all. And that's one of the things that Jon Kabat-Zinn says, not to try not to judge, not to judge your judging, he says, because it is a fairly kind of, I don't know, maybe it's learned. I don't know if I would say it's natural, but it's natural to the mind maybe. But so I think you're right. It's bringing a balance and noticing. So as you develop your mindfulness skill of observation, impartial observation. It's learning to see, am I shutting down a bit too soon on my assumption of what's happening here? Or do I need to bring some healthy judgment into here in order to keep myself safe or whatever? Because, as you say, it can be very impactful on health and well-being.
One of the very common questions that we get asked when we run mindfulness sessions are we doing it right? Am I a good meditator or a practitioner, right? And it's a very seemingly simple question, but behind it is really about an opportunity to practice non-judgment on ourselves, on the quality of our practice. What are your thoughts around that when you, do you get these sort of questions when
Yeah,
you're leading
all the time, all the time. And, one way that I sort of try to bring my participants to this is to say, first of all, that it's just the job doing what it's been trained to do, whether it's natural or not natural. That's what it's been trained to do, especially in our cultures. Our education system is so much like that. And so there's no point in fighting it for a start. No point in adding a resistance, and because that just creates more stress, is exactly what Jon says. It just creates more stress. But what makes it all easier is that whatever's coming up, even when you judge that you're judging, then that's what you can observe. And the best thing is, as Jon says, is you don't have to stop judging. You don't have to fix judging. You don't have to try and do anything different. You just have to observe. You just have to, not have to, but the practice is we just notice what's happening. And over time, what I found was, that's how my mind works. That's its job. But I don't have to get involved in it all the time. I can just watch what it's doing. And then that gives me a space to start going, okay, all right, well, is that a good thing? Do I need to take any notice of that? Is that going to keep me safer? Or is that going to restrict me? Is it cutting me off from, once we start to bring our insight into our practice, after our observation and our gentle attention to what's going on. So that I find that's where my practice has sort of gone in. My instinct is always to, okay, I'm doing something wrong, so I need to fix it. Whereas this allows you to just observe what's going on, but there's no responsibility to fix anything in that time. And I find that sort of calms the whole nervous system and allows you to open a little more easily to what is actually there, what is actually wanting you to, what wants to be seen, what wants to be heard in the service then of your well-being.
And you can then decide, right? To do something about it, about the situation, to raise your voice, to send an email, or take a break, or go home for that matter, right?
Exactly.
But stemming from this clarity of pausing in a non-judgmental sort of state, then we can make a more conscious and mindful decision, if you will.
Absolutely. And also, I think as you develop your practice and you work with non-judgment, there's a sense of trust of yourself that I feel is cultivated, because and the way for me it's come up in this way, and with my participants. What if you are generous enough to allow all that is arising to just be here and give it some moments? What if you trust that what is arising is coming from deep within you, maybe from that area of wholeness? And you will know pretty soon if you need to do anything about making changes and working with it differently. But in the meantime, you're learning to trust yourself that all that is here is here for the benefit of your unfolding in the mindfulness practice.
Yeah, so important words to take note of, right? Trust, of course, non-judging, observation, tuning in. Let's explore a little further about all this understanding into our daily living, right? So at the end of the day, I mean, it could be just a know-how and understanding, but what are your thoughts about how we can bring this more to life in our daily lives, this attitude of non-judging?
Well, I don't know about you. I'd like to hear how you see this too. I have found that as my practice developed, and I've specifically worked, say, with the non-judgment. I don't mean in a mental hard way, but just bringing to mind as you're doing your practice that, there's the judgment, and then intentionally, gently saying, okay, my choice is not to judge this, and come back to the breath and allow that openness. As that's developed, I've noticed that there's a natural flow into my day-to-day dealings, either with myself or other people. And I catch myself when I'm judging a situation or a person or my own personal experience a lot more often and a lot quicker than I used to before developing my practice. And so what I find is that pause that you were mentioning, I become aware of it more and I can stop. And it might mean that instead of reacting to someone that said something to me, I might choose, that makes me choose to just stop for a minute and really listen a little more deeply, perhaps. And so the interaction goes differently, maybe, or if I, evaluate something that I've done or said, and in the past I may have been pretty, harsh with myself about it. Again, I notice what I'm doing, and I can say to myself, okay, let's just stop. Let's just feel it in the body. Let's just take a pause. What else is here? And I might still continue to berate myself, or I might take a different way and go, okay, but maybe look at the bigger picture. Did you achieve what you tried to achieve? Maybe you didn't do it so skillfully, but so I just find it naturally flows. I think that's one thing about mindfulness. Once you learn to do mindfulness, this kind of impartial observing that you mentioned, I don't think you can stop doing it. It's kind of with you all the time. I don't know. How do you find it looks in daily life for you?
Yeah, absolutely right. Because it's not just about being mindful in a 10-minute practice, right? It's how it shows up in our daily lives, how we eat, how we interact with other people, how we go around doing our work.
Yeah.
I think that's where the practices translates into habits, and sort of a deeper consciousness and this ability to respond in a mindful way to how we experience our lives, right? And ultimately, the quality of our experience will also then change.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so those
Yeah.
are our thoughts. Yeah.
Yeah.
The word you mentioned that I picked out was this thing about catching ourselves, knowing, this is something that's happening, and then pausing, and then the other word you used was sort of shifting that focus to your breath, for example. So maybe can you share more about how this shifting towards the breath can help us cultivate this busyness of the mind and this non-judgment quality?
Okay, yeah. And again, I guess I want to preempt it by saying it's not necessarily easy. And I have read that even meditators who have, been meditating for long, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and thousands of hours, still work with this, because this is the practice. And that, what I mean by that is, we use something like the breath to anchor our focus, because what we're trying to do is help our mind slow down a bit, and we give it something to focus on, because the mind needs something. It can't just be left. It needs something. So in this way, we can use the breath, or we can use a body part, or we can use a sound, or whatever it is. The other thing about working with non-judgment is that, we go in really clearly into the practice thinking, this is the practice. I don't know if I can do it, but I'm going to give it my best shot. And I've been doing this for a little while now, but I still go into my practice time like that every time, because every time it's different. And so Jon Kabat-Zinn himself suggests that we take in this attitude of, I am going to be non-judgmental. I'm going to be this impartial observer of what is here in this moment. And so during the practice, we start with focusing on our breath, giving the mind, okay, we're giving it a message. You've got a million things going on, but we're going to focus just on breathing. And as you do that, you will be distracted by the mind coming up with sensations, feelings, impulses, thoughts. Okay, it's just what it does. And the idea is to notice what it's bringing up, and choosing not to get involved in any judgment of it, but in fact choosing to come back to the breathing. And so the practice is actually starting with an anchor, noticing that you've been taken away from the anchor, not getting caught up with it, and in that space choosing to come back to the anchor. Now, that doesn't mean that it happens beautifully, easily every time you do it. It depends also on, how stressed you are when you come, how rushed you are, how tired, how sick, how much in pain, blah, blah, blah. But the more you do it, the more it changes the neural patterns, and therefore the easier it becomes each time you try to do it. Maybe easier is not the right word, but as soon as you come into that space, your mind already knows, your brain already knows, we're here to do this. And we'll try and do it that way again. I don't know, does that concur with the way you see it?
I agree, and I think the best way is really to experience it, right? I mean, and I want to invite you to maybe lead us in a short practice so that we can all follow the instructions and work with our experiences, right? Because the key is here is the practice is about practicing. So it's something that we have to apply ourselves.
Exactly.
We don't just sit there and then have that quality become more second nature or more natural to us. We do have to put in the work. I guess there are no shortcuts.
Absolutely, and that's something that people find difficult. In everyday language, it's creating a new habit. You cannot undo an old habit, but you can only create new ones, and new ones take repetition and time. Yes, and you're very right. That word experience, and again, this is one thing I love about this program, especially the 8-week program, because it has a focused time in which you experience the impact of the practices on your body, on your mind. And you get to be the scientist who looks at, oh, this is what I'm feeling right now. This is what happens when I breathe like this or whatever. So you get firsthand, what's the word? When someone gives you firsthand feedback directly from yourself. So let's take
we go maybe 2 to 3 minutes. That's a short practice. We can process that for a bit. Yeah.
So just coming into the space, just kind of becoming aware of making that shift from your head to your body. And you can leave your eyes open or closed. And then as you're ready, just noticing your breath. And you can watch it at the belly or the chest, or as it moves in and out of the nostril. Just watching the breath, just feeling it as it moves into the body and moves out of the body. Now, straight away, probably you have already noticed, like even I, who do this a lot, there were thoughts already, am I doing this right for the audience? So that arose, and already there's a judgment attached to it. So just notice as you're breathing, what's arising? Is there a sensation, like something in your body? And what's your response to it? Is there an emotion that comes up? And what's your response? And when I say your response, what's your mind's response to it? Or there might be a thought like, I don't know if I feel comfortable doing this. Now, already that's a judgment. Or am I doing this right? That's already a judgment. So just do the breathing for a couple of seconds more and just notice what is coming up for you. Now, even as I was breathing, I noticed that my mind went to thinking about something that I had been researching before I came on. And so I just notice it, and I just escort my attention back to my breathing, and I'll catch up with that later. Just noticing anything that's arising as you focus on the breathing. And you might even notice how easy it is to get pulled away and to get held there. So it's important that you remain alert, notice, come back to the breath, choose to come back. And then in your own time, just opening your eyes again. Now, that was pretty short, but I don't know, honey, did you have any experience of
Lots of experiences.
The judging mind?
I was distracted. I had to remind myself to come back. And I suppose over my own practice, I think this coming back a lot more gentler with myself, right? So I guess in the past, I would kick myself, beat myself up, and really ask myself, why can't I do a better job? And right now, I think this sort of resetting that focus in a very open and inviting way back to the breath as an anchor, it's a very natural process, right? And so it's not like I feel like I will always drift, but it's when I drift, I realize it, and then I bring my focus back to the breath.
And I think you said it beautifully. I always say to my participants, if you can think of this as if you were working with a little child or even a puppy, not that I'm equating puppy and child, but either of those things. If you wanted to direct them in a certain way, with a puppy, you're trying to train them. Getting harsh is not the way. That shuts down everything in the mind and in the body for learning. So when you said gently bringing us back, kindly bringing us back, patience, which is another one of the attitudes you're going to explore later, that is what helps to get us to the place where we become more aware of being judgmental and letting it go more quickly.
Okay, and that takes practice, right? So the more we sort of put in the sort of mind gym kind of work, we'll become more attuned, more agile, and more responsive and more conscious to how to manage the mindscape, if we will, and how our mind works, and then we can respond in a better way.
Yeah. And I think one of the really important things about any of the practices is that when you have been working with choosing non-judgment in the moment, all right, whether it's in your practice or out in the world, take a moment then to check in and see, how do you feel? All right. There are lots of ways you can feel, but and I'm not trying to put experiences in people's mouths, but what does it feel like when you don't do so much judging? Check in with yourself, because that is what is going to keep you going back to do it. If you get, for want of a better word, a payoff, like perhaps you're less anxious, you're less agitated, you have less conflict. So with all the practices, it's really important to check in and savor, so it actually integrates into your body and your mind the positive impact or that's coming out of the practice. And then that helps to set the foundation for you to keep going.
Okay. Yeah, so all good. So I think this thing about the formal practice, putting in some time, and even a short practice like this for 2 to 3 minutes can accumulate and start to help you develop this attitude of non-judging in a mindful way, right? And then of course you can then even apply it to your other daily lives, how you eat, how you interact with other people, the different relationships that you have with the outside world, and also with yourself. And that's that moment where you can recognize, and then you can then decide how you can respond to it. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Any other tips? Any other tips or pointers on how we can bring this to life in our daily living?
Look, I can't stress enough the importance of being gentle with yourself about it. You're not going to be, even if you're practicing every day, you're not going to stop judging, and you're not meant to. All right. It's just helping you to create that pause so that you can get more of the information that's available and make more skillful decisions, more more healthy to you decisions and to other people. So be gentle, but if you really give it a go, give it some time, do the practice. 3 minutes, is good. 3 minutes several times a day is better, and adding some formal practice is even better if you really want to see the neural the changes in the neural pathways. And so if you take up the 8-week course, at least for that 8 weeks, give it all you've got so that you can really make a informed decision about how it's landing in your body.
Okay, so it's actually about less of the doing, but the being, right? Being with that gentleness and with this quality. That's my takeaway from you, Tony. Thank you so much for your
Okay.
insights and your
Thank you for
wisdom.
And I
Yeah.
love hearing your insights. It's good to hear over and over how we're understanding how it's evolving for us as we practice and as we put it into practice. Be prepared for that. I think it just keeps unfolding. You learn more and more, you understand more, you feel,
Great. Okay, well, thank you very much to everyone who listened in. I hope you got something out from today's conversation about non-judging, one of the key attitudes of mindfulness, and the deeper understanding followed by very simple practices and really this quality of being with ourselves, with gentleness in a non-judging way. So next week, we are going to follow up with the next attitude. And so stay tuned as you expand and you continue to deepen your own mindfulness practice. All right. Thank you very much for dialing
Thank you,
in.
everyone.
See you again.
And thanks, honey. Bye.
Bye for now.